Will you pray with me? Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. I heard them even before the sun came up, heralding the first faint shift from night to dawn, rustling outside my window, calling to one another in the trees, first one trill, then another, then a duet, then a full-throated chorus. The sky imperceptibly lightens and the birds are awake. And soon another instrument is heard from, the deep vibrato croak of the bullfrogs who rule our pond, followed by the chirps and the squeaks of prospective mates, the call and response that tells me there will be more frogs yet to come next season. Through the cold, stark winter months, I've missed this early morning symphony. When the sun doesn't rise before 7:15, it feels like nature pulls the covers back over her head. But that season is over now, and each morning is a veritable explosion of sound and song. It's as if every creature in the fields and forests and ponds are saying, "It's just so good to be alive." Scientists tell us that these wild sounds have been heralding the dawn since the beginning of the Cenozoic era, 65 million years ago for birds, with insects and frogs much earlier, 250 million years ago. Now we know this communication evolved to ensure survival, to find food, to warn about predators, and most importantly, to mate, to pass along genes and to make sure that the next generation can do the same. And through the lens of evolution, this makes perfect sense. But I also can't help but feel that there is something else going on here, something a little extra, beyond food and danger and sex. And maybe it's just my human ears, but all that glorious pre-dawn exuberant noise feels a whole lot like praise. Our earliest ancestors heard these wild melodies even before they developed language. Scientists believe that we humans most likely sang before we could talk. Simple chants and vocal patterns carried across distances were how we first communicated. And like the creatures that evolved before us, they began as a tool for survival. But over time, they became so much more than that. The first musical instruments, dating to over 40,000 years ago, were found in caves, surrounded by rock circles, fires, and evidence of ritual. Deeply hardwired within us, music calls people together to tell stories, to create community, to connect with a larger spirit. And even with our sophisticated modern language, music touches us in ways that other communications simply can't. A song can evoke feelings that carry us back in time, drawing out forgotten moments from deep inside. In our brains, music lights up our limbic system, which processes our emotions and our memories. Folks suffering with advanced dementia may struggle to remember the names of their children, but when they hear a beloved piece of music, they can often sing every word, even from just the first few notes. Music taps into something primal and formative. And when shared in community, it inspires a sense of transcendence, a connection within and beyond our singular experience that reaches to the vibrations of the cosmos. And it's not just for humans. To quote that beloved Christmas hymn, when our joy is overflowing, heaven and nature sing. It is the melody of God. It is the rhythm of praise. And that is what the psalmist invites us to do this morning, to praise. In fact, it's what every moment of worship invites us to do, to tap into that transcendent connection and join in the chorus of heaven and earth that says, "It's just so good to be alive." Simply put, to make a joyful noise to the Lord. Now, I'm grateful that the psalmist didn't write, "Sing a classic aria to the Lord," or "Play a piano concerto to the Lord," because I would have had to bow out. My musical chops, Celtic heart notwithstanding, are minimal. But joyful noise, I am all in with that. In the original Hebrew of the Psalms, the word for noise is actually shout. And I think we can substitute croak or chirp or buzz or bellow, whatever you were designed to do. Other Psalms echo this, where the rivers clap their hands and the mountains sing for joy. And as Jesus was entering Jerusalem to the raucous cries of the crowds, he warned the leaders that if the people were silenced, the very stones would shout out. When we feel the marvelous, extravagant love of God surrounding us, when our hearts overflow with love and praise, when there is a joyful noise to be made, it simply cannot be contained. Now, it was this same uncontainable exuberance in creation that inspired St. Francis to write his Canticle of the Sun that we sang together this morning. And it was this same desire to find a rhythm more in tune with God's melody that gave him the courage to step away from the life he knew, to create a new kind of existence, a new kind of community. He left behind the relentless beat of production and consumption that surrounded him, the beat that was deadening his soul. You see, Francis was born into a family of wealthy cloth merchants, and he spent his early years in extravagance and competition for status. But as his father began to prepare him to take over the business, Francis began to feel an emptiness inside, a profound disconnect between the values that he saw in his culture and a growing longing for God in his heart. And the more he tried to achieve, the greater the disconnect and the longing became, until it reached a point where his whole being rebelled. And in a dramatic moment of reckoning, he literally stripped himself naked from his fine clothes and turned his back on his privilege and his family and walked into the forest. There he sought a life of profound simplicity, as one creature among many in the glorious web of creation. And he began a humble movement, the Franciscans, living close to the earth, centered on the rhythms of prayer and praise and service that aligned him, body and soul, with the magnificent, matchless love of God. As I leave later today on my sabbatical, I'm hoping to find a new rhythm as well. Now, my departure is not nearly as radical and dramatic as Francis's, thank goodness for that. But it's rooted in the same desire to reclaim a deeper alignment with God. Now, it's not that I don't find profound joy in what I do among us here. Ministry is truly a labor of love, but it can be a labor, right? We easily slip into patterns of overwork. And while we pastors do try our best to maintain healthy boundaries, the requirements of our position and the nature of our relationships within the congregation can make that tricky to do. It seems there's always something else waiting for us. And as deeply rewarding as our work is, our bodies and minds are not machines. We need to power down, to disrupt patterns of stress and overwork, and sometimes to reboot altogether. Hence, sabbatical. Now, the term sabbatical comes from the Hebrew word Sabbath, that seventh day of rest, that weaves itself through our scriptures from the very first chapter. After spending 6 days overachieving, God rests. She stops. She unplugs. She ceases doing and simply is. The Hebrew people put this commandment in the top 10, on par with "thou shalt not kill," because keeping the Sabbath, remembering to rest, is essential to life. And not just because too much work can wear our bodies out, it can wear us down spiritually as well. When we get lost in our roles and our titles, our jobs, we forget who we are underneath all those things. And when we forget who we are, we lose touch with the one who made us. And then everything goes out of whack. Even work we love can burn us out when we forget why we do it. However, when we break that doing pattern and choose to just be, we let ourselves discover once again what brings us joy, what enlivens our step, what makes our hearts sing, what makes us human. We discover perspective. We discover that even without our constant micromanaging, the world keeps turning. That we are not the prime movers of the universe. God is. And when we decide to sit out around, to consciously release our busyness, the rhythms of life continue everywhere, all the time, and just as they are supposed to do. As humbling as that is a blessed, blessed thing. So what will this reboot look like for me? Well, it will be a process of letting go, that I know. One of my favorite quotes about this comes from the writer Anne Lamott when she says, "Almost everything will work better if you unplug it for a while, even you." And that's what a sabbatical is. It's an unplugging for a while. So in a few days, I'm going to begin by spending time with St. Francis and St. Clare, a couple of folks who might be considered the patron saints of unplugging. I'll be participating in a Franciscan-led pilgrimage to Assisi for a couple of weeks. And then I'll return back home to my own little garden to embrace the noisy joy of that dawn chorus outside my window and play a little while in the dirt. And I'll be taking time to reconnect with those folks in my life, my dear family and friends, to feed our souls and to make some seriously noisy joy together. And my spirit really longs for that. Which does not mean I will not miss you all in this beloved community. It's an unbelievable blessing to be in your lives and to serve alongside you. And I know that this next year will bring some challenges and some changes for all of us. So as hard as it may be to begin my sabbatical at this particular moment, I rest easy knowing that you will find your rhythm while I'm away. Reverend John will continue to guide and serve this church so ably and so graciously and generously. You will have beautiful, inspiring worship with Julie and David and Rev Karma and Reverend Heather and the wonderful roster of guest preachers who will share their wisdom with each of you during the summer. Our dedicated lay leadership council will be making thoughtful decisions about how we move into this new challenging year, and there will be a role for every single one of you to play. Our church administrator, Rena Majid, and the church staff will keep the ship running smoothly, and all of this will go on, even without me, especially without me. And when I return to you in August, it will be with a renewed spirit and fresh energy and a restored soul to imagine what new rhythms God is inviting us to discover together. Almost anything will work better if you unplug it for a while, even you and even me. May this sabbatical season be a source of grace and growth for all of us. May it teach us new rhythms and new melodies and open our hearts to feel the magnificent love of God filling us each day we are apart. And when we return to each other once again, I look forward to making some epically joyful noise together. May it be so. Amen.